What? My voice echoed through the dining room, bouncing off the polished mahogany walls. You're making Jason the CEO? I scanned the table expecting someone, anyone, to laugh to tell me this was some ridiculous joke. But my parents' expressions were carved in stone, and my brother Jason sat there smirking like he had just hit the jackpot. In a way he had. Sweetheart, Mom sighed exasperated. Jason has the leadership qualities needed for this. You're too rigid, too serious. Dad nodded as if that was the final word on the matter. You're great with numbers, Kelly, but you don't inspire people the way Jason does. A short, humorless laugh escaped me. Jason? Inspiring? The same Jason who had never held a real job. The one who spent more time partying than working, who had blown through his trust fund. Twice. Only to come crawling back for more? This was the person they were handing our family's business to? The company our grandfather built with his own hands? But I've been working at Anderson Home Goods for years. I protested. I restructured our supply chain, renegotiated contracts. I've put in the work. You're a good worker, Dad interrupted, but Jason's a natural leader. You should be happy for him. Jason leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers behind his head. Yeah, Cal, don't take it so personally. You can still be involved, just, in a support role. Support role. The words hit like a slap. I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this company. Late nights, early mornings, endless hours spent running numbers, while my so-called leader of a brother partied his way through his 20s. I turned to my mother, searching for some kind of lifeline. Mom, please. She simply patted my hand like I was a child. You should focus on something else, sweetheart. Maybe start a little side business of your own. Something inside me snapped. You want me to start my own business? My voice was dangerously calm. Fine. But don't come crawling back when Jason runs this place into the ground. Jason chuckled. Relax, sis. I got this. I stood so fast my chair nearly toppled over. Without another word, I walked out of that dining room, out of that house, and, at least in my mind, out of their lives. Or so I thought. Because years later they would come knocking on my door. And this time I would be the one calling the shots. Walking out of that house felt like ripping off a bandage. But instead of relief, all I felt was rage. Not the kind that makes you scream or throw things. No, this was the kind that burrowed deep into your bones. The kind that fueled late nights, early mornings, and every ounce of effort poured into proving someone wrong. For years I had followed the rules, walked the path my parents had laid out for me. I had worked tirelessly for our family business, only to be discarded like an afterthought. For what? So Jason could waltz in, take credit for my work, and pretend he knew what he was doing? Fine. If they thought I was only good enough for a side business, I'd build one so successful they'd choke on their words. For weeks I brainstormed, scribbling notes, researching markets. What could I create that was truly mine? Then it hit me. I had spent years studying supply chains, product sourcing, and customer trends. I knew what worked and what didn't. And now I would use that knowledge to build something of my own. Something they could never take away. I had seen it firsthand, the rise of eco-friendly, affordable, high-quality home products. A market my family's outdated company had completely ignored. They still relied on old-school wholesalers, refusing to adapt to the new wave of direct-to-consumer e-commerce. But what if I launched my own brand? A home goods line focused on sustainability, affordability, and modern design. Not the cheap, mass-produced junk my parents' company stocked, but something fresh. A brand that made homes beautiful without breaking the bank. There was just one problem. I was broke. Unlike Jason, I didn't have a trust fund or wealthy parents willing to throw money at me. Everything I had was whatever I could scrape together from my savings. I took a deep breath and did the scariest thing I had ever done. I cashed out my retirement fund. It wasn't much, just enough to cover my first round of product samples and a small batch of inventory. I worked day and night designing my first collection. Minimalist, high-quality, eco-friendly home essentials. A factory in Vietnam agreed to produce my designs in small batches, and I found a reliable logistics partner. I built my website from scratch, taught myself digital marketing, and finally I launched my online store. And then I waited. I should have known my family wouldn't support me. At a cousin's wedding, I casually mentioned my business idea. Jason practically choked on his champagne. "Wait, let me get this straight," he said, laughing. "You're selling what?" "Bamboo cutting boards and organic dish towels. Online." My mother shook her head with a pitying smile. "Kelly, honey, I know you're upset about the business, but this isn't realistic." Dad sighed. "We have connections, sweetheart. If you really wanted to start a business, you should have come to us. But e-commerce? It's not stable. That's why we focus on traditional retail." I clenched my jaw. "You mean the failing retail business you just handed over to Jason?" Jason rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Look, I hope it works out for you, Kel. But let's be honest, you don't have the experience to make this work." I let them laugh. I let them dismiss me. Because deep down I knew something they didn't. I knew they were stuck in the past. I knew that while they mocked online businesses, the world was shifting beneath their feet. I knew that the very thing they scoffed at was about to change everything. The first month was brutal. I ran ads that barely converted. Website traffic was low. Orders trickled in one at a time, just enough to keep me from panicking. I packed every box myself, handwrote thank you notes, and obsessively tracked customer feedback. And then, it happened. One night I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. A social media influencer with 2 million followers had posted about my brand. She had ordered one of my products, loved it, and raved about it to her audience. By morning I had 5,000 new orders. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was it. For the next 2 weeks I barely slept. I scrambled to fulfill orders, managed a flood of emails, and tried to keep up with the explosion of interest. I reinvested every cent into inventory, hired a fulfillment company, and scaled faster than I ever imagined. 3 months later, my little side business had made its first $1 million in sales. And just as I had predicted, Jason's company? It was falling apart. Jason had always been good at talking. Smooth, confident, able to convince anyone he knew exactly what he was doing even when he had no idea. But there's one thing charm can't fix. Numbers. And numbers don't lie. The first signs of trouble at Anderson Home Goods came faster than I expected. At first I only heard whispers. Old coworkers grumbling about delayed shipments, unhappy suppliers, and confused leadership. Employees were frustrated. Jason had grand ideas but zero execution. He wanted the company to be trendy, but instead of modernizing operations, he blew a fortune on expensive marketing campaigns that made no sense. Then came the price hikes. Desperate to boost revenue without actually improving the business, Jason jacked up prices. On everything. Even the cheapest, most basic products suddenly cost 40% more. Customers noticed. Sales plummeted. The company tried to backpedal, but by then the damage was done. Their reputation was sinking fast. I should have felt bad. I should have felt some kind of sympathy watching my family's legacy crumble because they had placed their trust in the wrong child. But all I felt was satisfaction. Because while Jason's business collapsed, mine was exploding. After my brand went viral, things moved fast. I reinvested every dollar, expanding my product line, optimizing supply chains, and securing better manufacturing deals. I built a rock-solid customer base through word of mouth and real marketing. Unlike Jason, I didn't just throw money at flashy ads. I knew how to read the market. 6 months in, $5 million in sales. By the end of the year, $12 million. I wasn't just running a business. I was running an empire. And then came the phone call. I was in my office reviewing partnership proposals when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the best of me. "Kelly," Dad's voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "Oh. About what?" A long pause. Then said, "It's about the company. We're struggling." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. He cleared his throat. Jason's had some difficulties. The market has changed and I cut him off. No, Dad. The market didn't change. You just put an incompetent CEO in charge. More silence. Then quieter this time. We need your help. There it was. The man who once told me Jason was a natural leader was now begging me to fix his mistake. I should have hung up right then and there. But instead I smiled. Because an idea had just formed. A deliciously cruel idea. The next morning I called a meeting. Not at my father's failing office. At my corporate headquarters. I wanted them to see exactly how far I'd come. When my parents and Jason arrived, their expressions were priceless. My office was everything Anderson Home Goods wasn't. Sleek, modern, and thriving. Employees moved with purpose, every inch of the space radiating success. Mom looked around stunned. Wow, Kelly, this is impressive. Dad cleared his throat. Yes, very impressive. But let's get to the point. Jason sulked, arms crossed, jaw tight, refusing to make eye contact. I took my time savoring the moment. Finally, I leaned forward. So, let me get this straight. You're asking me, the daughter you dismissed, the one whose business you mocked, to come fix your mess. Dad hesitated. Well, when you put it that way. That is the way it is, I snapped. Jason rolled his eyes. Whatever. Just name your price, okay? We need you to bring the company back on its feet. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, Jason, you don't get it, do you? I leaned back, folding my arms. I don't need your company. I built my own. And guess what? It's bigger than yours ever was. Jason's face turned red. That's not true. I pulled out my phone, opened my financial dashboard, and turned the screen toward them. $12,340,000 in revenue. Mom gasped. Dad paled. Jason. He looked like he was about to throw up. That's impossible, he muttered. I grinned. It's not just possible, it's my reality. Dad exhaled sharply. Kelly, please. We're running out of time. The bank is threatening to seize assets. I tapped my chin, pretending to think. All right, I said. I'll help. Their faces lit up. But then I continued. On one condition. They leaned forward. Jason frowned. What do you mean? I smiled, slow and sweet. You need jobs, don't you? I gestured around my thriving company. Well, I have openings. I let the words sink in. But not as executives. I leaned in, my voice dropping. You can start as unpaid interns. The silence was deafening. Jason shot up. You've got to be joking. I shrugged. Take it or leave it. Mom looked at Dad, desperate. Jason's jaw clenched. They had no choice. Fine, Dad finally said, voice shaking with shame. I stood up, extending my hand. Welcome to your new reality. Hope you enjoy fetching coffee. Their first day as interns? Pure gold. Jason, my parents' golden child, their hand-picked soap, stood in front of me in my office wearing a cheap, poorly ironed button-up. Clearly he wasn't used to dressing himself. His usual smugness. Gone. He glared at the floor, arms crossed like a sulking teenager. My father, once so proud and authoritative, stood stiffly beside him. And my mother, the woman who had spent her life believing Jason could do no wrong, looked like she might faint. I let the silence drag, letting them feel the weight of what they had become. Then finally I leaned back in my chair. Let's talk about your new responsibilities. Jason scoffed. This is humiliating. You're doing this just to mess with us. I smirked. No, Jason. I'm doing this because it's what you deserve. But by all means, if you'd rather be unemployed, there's the door. His jaw clenched, nostrils flaring. He hated this. And that made it even better. Dad cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile. Kelly, honey, let's be reasonable. Surely there's a better use of our skills than menial work. I arched an eyebrow. Skills? You mean the ones that ran your business into the ground? A flicker of shame crossed his face. But he said nothing. All right then, I continued, picking up a sheet of paper. Here are your assignments. I handed each of them a printout. Jason scanned his and immediately turned red. You want me to organize the warehouse? I nodded. That's right. We just expanded and I need someone to do inventory checks. Since you're such a natural leader, I'm sure you can figure it out. Jason looked like he wanted to throw the paper in my face. And what about us? Mom asked hesitantly. I smiled. Featly. Mom, I put you in customer service. Her eyes widened in horror. Customer service? That's right. I need someone to handle incoming complaints. Customers will be calling, emailing, and leaving reviews all day. Your job is to make sure they're happy. She looked physically ill. And Dad, I continued, turning to him, you'll be handling supplier relations. You'll be responsible for cold calling manufacturers, negotiating rates, and making sure we never have delays. Dad blinked, processing. You want me to call suppliers? That's grunt work. I grinned. Exactly. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. Let's be honest, if Jason had succeeded, you wouldn't be here right now. You'd still be patting his back, telling him how brilliant he is. You'd still be looking down on me like I was nothing. Dad opened his mouth to argue. But then he hesitated. Because he knew I was right. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline of my success. Office buildings. Bustling streets. People carrying shopping bags. Some filled with my brand's products. I had built something real. Something that mattered. Meanwhile, my parents had lost everything because they bet on the wrong person. I turned back to them. You know what hurts the most? I asked quietly. My mother blinked, swallowing hard. What? I exhaled sharply. It's not that you chose Jason. It's not even that you didn't believe in me. I met their eyes. It's that when I walked away, you didn't care. Their faces fell. You didn't call. You didn't check in. You didn't even ask how I was. I was nothing more than an afterthought to them. A heavy silence stretched between us. And then I saw it. The guilt. The realization that they had burned this bridge long before I ever set it on fire. My father rubbed his temples. We thought you'd come back. That you'd fail and realize you needed us. I let out a bitter laugh. Wow. That says everything, doesn't it? My mother's voice was shaky. Kelly, we never wanted to hurt you. I tilted my head. Then why did you? Her lips parted, but she had no answer. Because there wasn't one. I turned, walked back to my desk, and picked up a small stack of papers. Since you're looking for another chance, let me make you an offer. I tossed the documents in front of them. They hesitated before picking them up. My father frowned. What is this? I smiled. A severance package. You resign from my company permanently, and in return I make a generous one-time payout so you don't have to struggle. My mother's face twisted in shock. You're paying us to leave? That's right, I said smoothly. Because I don't trust you. And I don't want you involved in my business. My father's grip on the paper tightened. This is insulting. No, Dad. What was insulting was spending my whole life being treated like I wasn't good enough for you. My mother's eyes watered. Is this really what you want? I met her gaze. It's what I need. A long silence. Then finally, my father let out a slow breath. Fine, he muttered. We'll take it. My mother's lips trembled, but she nodded. If this is what will make you happy, sweetheart, then we'll go. A pang of something, almost like sadness, hit me. This was the final goodbye. But I didn't stop them. Because I was done waiting for them to love me the way I deserved. They signed the papers. Stood up. Gave me one last lingering look. And then they left. I watched from my office window as they walked out. Out of my building. Out of my life. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I sat in my office long after they were gone, staring at the signed severance agreement on my desk. It was over. For years I had wanted their approval, wanted their validation, wanted them to see me, to finally recognize that I was worth something. But now, I realized something far more important. I didn't need them. I had built my own empire. Without their support, I had succeeded despite them, not because of them. And that was the greatest victory of all. In the weeks that followed, things settled into a new kind of normal. Jason, gone. No surprise there. Last I heard, he was bouncing between failed startup ideas, still chasing easy money instead of doing real work. My parents moved out of state. They took my severance package, bought a smaller house somewhere quiet, far from the city. I didn't hear from them much after that. And honestly, I was fine with that. No more waiting for approval. No more proving myself. No more looking over my shoulder wondering if I was enough. Because now, I knew I was enough. With my family out of the picture, I threw myself into my company. And the best part? I didn't have to do it alone. Unlike my parents' business, where employees were treated like disposable workers, I built a team that mattered. Sarah, my logistics manager, she started as a warehouse assistant and worked her way up. Maria, my head of customer service, she had been turned down by dozens of companies before I gave her a shot. I surrounded myself with people who cared, who believed in the vision, who knew that success wasn't about a last name, it was about hard work, integrity, and the willingness to adapt. And because of that, we didn't just grow, we thrived. A year later, I stood in a grand ballroom, the sound of applause echoing around me. My company had just been named fastest growing e-commerce brand of the year. I stepped onto the stage, taking the award with steady hands. I turned to the microphone, took a deep breath. A few years ago, I was told I wasn't leadership material, that I was too rigid, too serious, that I wasn't the right fit for success. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I smiled. I'm standing here today because I refuse to believe that. Another round of applause. Success isn't about luck. It's not about charm. It's not about being born into the right family. I paused, letting my words sink in. Success is about persistence. It's about refusing to let people define you. It's about knowing your worth, even when no one else does. The applause erupted into a standing ovation. I stepped back, my heart pounding. This was what I had always dreamed of. Not their approval, not their validation, but this moment, where I stood tall, on my own. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's winning without them.